Thanks, everyone, for joining me here on the main event. My name is Joe Tillman, and I'm sometimes known as the original hair transplant mentor. I haven't said that one in a long time. That's why I used to introduce myself. But if you don't know who I am or what I'm doing here, my name is Joe Tillman. I've been in the hair transplant industry for 20 years, and why is that? I got a double image going on. Interesting. Yeah, been in the hair transplant industry for 20 years, and I've been a hair transplant patient for almost 30 years. I started out as a young, dumb, not doing any research kind of kid that was dealing with hair loss, but it wasn't a huge issue for me. Got talked into it by a doctor because I was at a clinic to support my buddy that actually wanted to have surgery. I got talked into it too. Had 2 bad hair transplant surgeries, left with 2 wide donor scars in the back, ant legs that looked like they were on growth hormone sticking out of the back of my scalp, and lost the rest of my hair. Lived like that for 9 years and finally got repaired in 2002 with Dr. Jerry Wong of Hassan Wong, and that set my career before me. That changed my life because the repair was such a profound change for my life that I was motivated to share with the world. And you got to understand, 2002, the online environment was drastically different than it is today. And I wound up being the first person online anywhere in the world to document in nearly real time the recovery process, or the surgery itself, and then the recovery process, 1 day, 2 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, months, and up to a year and longer after the surgery. And it was really an amazing, it wasn't just to share, but what I realized later on is that the entire experience was therapeutic for me. Because when you deal with this on such a level, I'm talking about being a repair patient, and a lot of non-repair patients that are having a hard time dealing with the hair loss, it can apply to them too. But when you, or at least in my case, when I was sharing my recovery, I was also sharing my pain. And this may or may not make sense to some of you, but it was really liberating for me to share my experience and to talk about the pain that I had been through, that I've been dealing with, and to show that I'd come through on the other side where, it's pretty sad to say, but my only goal with my first surgery, my first repair surgery, was to look normal. And that's a really powerful, deceptively powerful thing to say, because when you don't look normal, when you have, I love this term I came up with, ant legs on growth hormone sticking out of your head. I think that's the perfect explanation for what I had going on. It really changes you in a way that you well, at least I can't really explain. But then to have that weight lift off my shoulders, it was just amazing, and that set me on my path where I started working at the clinic, and I wanted to change the industry. I wanted to use my new position at Hassan Wong to influence the direction of the hair transplant industry. And I actually did something. Not really patting myself on the back, but I am a little bit. I set the standard for documentation on how clinics should document their results. And I'm pretty proud of that. But a lot of what I've done in that arena has been ignored by clinics because I actually talked to one clinic about this. They said it showed too much detail. And that was disturbing. Not a clinic I work with, but a clinic that I used to talk to quite a bit. So anyway, I'm just kind of reminiscing about ancient history. But here we are today. It is Tuesday, April 18th, 2023, and this is episode 13 of the main event. This is my solo outing, the only daily broadcast, at least Monday through Thursday, hair loss and hair restoration show on the interwebs, certainly on YouTube, and I'm enjoying it. I hope you guys are, because it gives me an opportunity to speak to a lot of you directly. Every Friday, I'm the co-host of Spencer Coburn's The Bald Truth with Spencer Coburn, my friend, my colleague, my mentor in many ways, the OG, and we've been doing that show for years, and it's also right here on the Hair Transplant channel on YouTube. Same time as this show, it's 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and then 10 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. This is a call-in show, and what that means, there's a phone number, and that phone number is toll-free in North America. It's 1-833-563-4247. Again, it's 833-563-4247, toll-free North America. You can call me worldwide if you use Skype or any other calling app. Just enter that in. You can give me a shout. And I think someone just took my advice. Let's see who this is. There we go. Hey, you're on the main event. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Ed from Toronto.
Hey, Ed. How you doing?
Good, thanks. I will jump into the questions, but you answered one of mine when you talked about your experience.
Okay.
With your hair, I guess the transplant you got initially and how you had to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw your pictures, and I mean, can you just, just by your pictures, you don't seem devastated, but inside, was it 9 years of distraught feelings, or was it waves of feelings? I'm just curious.
That's a good question. Well, I can say this, that every morning was a challenge. Of varying degrees of severity, because I had to work with, very very little hair in the front, but it was very obvious what it was. And as I got older, it would get worse, obviously, because I was losing more hair. And by the time I was in my mid-20s, I actually started acting in college, and when I say in college, my mid-20s, I went back to college a couple times, actually, and it became a problem for me then. But I also developed an ability to push it down deep when I was in public situations, or I should say groups of situations where I was in the middle of groups of people. And I do remember when I was on stage, that was the time I discovered GLH hair in a can, which was I laugh every time I think about that, because it was such a ridiculous product. I mean, it was a fantastic product, but it was ridiculous for me. But I was using that on stage on a few different plays and performances I was in. But there would be times when I would have a really hard time leaving the house.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, the quick fix solution is to throw a hat on and walk out the door, but that's not always possible. And throughout my 20s, I was actually in a position professionally where I couldn't wear a hat. I was in the restaurant business for several years, and I'm not talking McDonald's. I'm talking high level, real service type of restaurants with the napkin and the tuxedo type of service, right? And bartending, things like that. I really enjoyed that. That was a great time in my life, but I couldn't wear a hat. I had to look, tight. I had to look professional. I had to present myself well. And then another period of my life, I was also I had a couple jobs where I was also working in hospital, in physical therapy and trauma burn units, where I was working with patients and helping them. So I couldn't wear a hat. And in some situations, I'll never forget this. When I actually switched careers and I started to get into sales, I was in, what was it? IT sales on the corporate level. I obviously couldn't wear a hat there either. And I was in a very high pressure sales environment where I learned a lot. It was a great experience, but the guys I was working with, they were cutthroat. And I mean, we're buddies and we'd have fun and go have beers after work and stuff. But man, that sales floor, it was a lot like Glengarry Glen Ross. It was a lot like that. And so when you're in a cutthroat environment like that, your colleagues will do anything, say anything to get in your head so that, they can beat you for that bonus or for, whatever. And it happened, man. It happened a couple times where my hair was brought up. I'll never forget. I actually, I've talked about this publicly a couple times. 2 times stand out to this day. The first was when I was in a sales meeting, and the guy that it was always between me and him, number 1 and number 2 in the company for sales. And he and I were in a sales meeting with the rest of the crew, and we got into an argument, and he said something about my hair during the argument. So it was meant to wound me. And so I threw one back at him about the reason why he wears suspenders. It's because he's got such a fat ass. And we almost jumped across the table at each other, but we're still friends to this day. We actually became really good friends after that one. But yeah, so there was that was really bad. But then the worst one was when this old sales guy came in. When I say old sales guy, I mean old school sales guy, was hired by the company. And he's one of these guys that came in and he's got like lots of great contacts in the industry already, and government level contracts and corporate level contracts, and so he was already established in the industry. But he was an old dog. Like he was in his 60s easy. I was in my late 20s, and so his job in this kind of sales environment, his job was to find the guys that were the leaders and work them, try to get in their heads. So when he came after me in front of everyone. And he did it like this. He said, "Hey, Joe, I need to ask you something." I was like, "What's that?" And he says, sorry.
This is Mordecai.
There we go. Are you still there? Guy in Toronto. Hello, Toronto. Toronto, you still there?
Yeah. Hey, what's up? It's Morty from Brooklyn.
Hey, Morty. Sorry, I was on another call. Let me put you on hold. Hold on.
Hello.
Toronto, there you are. Okay, sorry. Got that mixed up. So,
yeah.
So he came at me, and he's like, "Hey, Joe, I need to ask you a question. Where did you get those hair plugs?"
Oh, man.
You talk about butterflies, like hardcore butterflies.
Yep.
And we're standing right there. Like he asked me to come up to him so we could talk. And I was just, I thought I was going to throw up. And so
I feel like throwing up just listening to that.
Yeah, it was tough. And so I kept my cool, and I brought him into, I said, "Well, let's go over here. Let's talk about it." And I knew he was bullshitting with me because he had a lot of hair. So I just played it cool. And I said, that's I know what you're doing. And that was uncool. I said, but if you feel like you have to do something like that because you feel threatened, I feel sorry for you. And that's the best comeback I could muster at the time. I mean, he's an old guy, and I'm like, what am I going to do? But yeah, I still think about that from time to time, and it still wounds me a little bit, or I still feel that wound when I think about it, because it was just an indicator of how shitty some people can be in life just to get ahead. And yeah, so those are a couple stories of the difficulty I had going through that period of my life. And that's also why, that just goes into the bank, right? So when you feel that weight lift off your shoulders, that's one of those things that gets lifted up. Like, it doesn't bother me now, but when I think about how it bothered me then, it was brutal. And so those are some stories that's some of the things I dealt with. Most of the time, it was something I could deal with, but those few times, no, it was tough.
Thanks. That puts the pictures and stuff in perspective in terms of what you were going through. Thank you.
You're welcome,
Joe.
Is that all you needed?
I've got a few more questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You mentioned. So I'll ask you this question. And I think from what I understand or understood is that if hypothetically your hair was going to get thicker if you were taking some medication or something, it would be after, I don't know if the correct term is after it sheds and starts growing back, or can it actually grow thicker while it's actively growing, like a tree trunk kind of?
Sorry, I didn't quite get that question. Can you repeat it?
Yeah. So I've always thought that if your hair was going to get thicker, it would be growing, and then the base of it would get thicker, the top of it would just still be thin. Mm-hmm. If you were going to take medication and to thicken your hair, would that hair get thicker after it sheds? Oh, okay. On the next hair regrowth cycle? Got it.
Sorry, I'm sorry for asking you to repeat that. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's the way it would work. Every cycle of growth that starts over, it will come in a bit stronger, a bit thicker on each cycle, and that cycle is depending on what you're taking, but that cycle can be extended as well. But that's why, like, it's actually a good thing when people start their medication. When you do see a shed in the first couple of months after you start taking it, that's actually a good sign, because it's kicking in that growth cycle, and that next round should be a bit thicker. Fingers crossed. I mean, but that's generally the way it works. Very, very broad brush here that I'm painting with. That's the way it should work. And yeah. Yep.
Okay, so then I'm not holding my breath on this, but just out of curiosity, if you're taking finasteride and, 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line, is it still a possibility for hair to get thicker? Mm-hmm. It's growing for 5 years because of finasteride, then you shed it. Is there a potential after 5 years for it to even get stronger and thicker, or does it just kind of maintain where you were perhaps after 2 years?
Well, that's a good question. When you say thicker, you're talking about a thicker hair shaft diameter after 5 years?
Diameter.
Oh, yeah, okay. Diameter. Yeah. That is pretty difficult to answer. I mean, I won't say no, it can't, only because I know that there was a study done in Japan, as a 10-year study, talking about showing how hair counts continued to increase for the majority of the patients for up to 10 years. I'm paraphrasing drastically, but it was along those lines. And that doesn't have to do with your question, but the reason why I brought that up is because to show that the efficacy can continue to improve over a long period of time. So when you ask me, can the hair shaft diameter thicken past 5 years? If you're talking about hair that's been miniaturized and it's not quite return to its normal hair shaft diameter? I'll say potentially, only because of that.
Okay.
Only because of that observation in the study. Only because of the conclusion of that study where they showed hair counts were higher after 10 years. I won't say no, but I would say it's unlikely that if you're not seeing an increase, but you're also not seeing a decrease, that's obviously a great thing. But you could count that up as just holding your ground, which is a win in my book. Like if you're holding ground, it's not getting any worse. That's a win. Anything above and beyond that is bonus.
Yep.
Okay.
Definitely. Yep. 2 more questions here.
Okay.
I've got, and I think I know there's diffused hair loss where it's like diffused all over, even on the sides. But I think the one I'm talking about, and you may have mentioned it, is the one where it's sparse. There's a hair, and then there's no hair next to it, and there's a hair, but there's still coverage. Is it? And I know I've heard about shock loss, about implants near other hairs. But if someone's on finasteride and they want to build up the density in hair that's, I guess again, say diffused in a location, is it okay to do it in there? Like, is that just a standard procedure at this point in time, or do you have to be really, really careful?
Okay, so that's a good question. So there's a reason in a recent episode, I don't remember which one, but someone was asking me about, I think it was on last week's The Bald Truth, actually. Someone was talking about the difference between shaving and not shaving. And specifically, they're talking about long hair or no shave FUE. And it's my opinion that whenever you're performing a hair transplant into an area of loss that isn't bald, in other words, an area of diffused thinning like you're talking about, number one, it depends on how thin it is, because there is a threshold where even the best hair transplant doctor won't attempt to thicken a diffused head of hair. There is a threshold, and different doctors have different thresholds. And there is no black and white fixture of what that threshold is. It's literally an eyeball assessment. I mean, sure, they'll get up close and detailed on the recipient area as far as looking at the different factors that you're dealing with, but the decision comes down to eyeballing it. Do I think I can get in here without causing a lot of damage? Yes or no? It's a gut feeling. It's not a mathematical formula. So it is possible. And that's why I was talking about shaving. And the reason why I say that is because when you shave the scalp, I'm talking about the recipient area and the donor area, but in your case, we're talking about diffuse, so it's the recipient area. When you shave it down to, say, 2 millimeters, then you can see clearly every gap in between each hair. You can see the angle of each hair. You can see the direction of each hair. And it's important because when you can see those spaces, that's only part of the battle. Because when you're making that incision, if you're not following the angle and direction of the hairs around that space, if you're not parallel to the existing growth, then you're going to cross over and transect those other surrounding hairs that are in that periphery of the open space. And that's where you cause permanent shock loss from transection. That's why doctors shave the recipient area. The only reason why doctors don't shave is for the patient's mental well-being, their comfort level. And in a lot of cases, it's to get people in the chair. Oh, you mean I don't have to shave? Pff, sign me up, But I'm a firm believer in making it easy for the doctor, not easy for the patient. I don't give a shit how easy it is for the patient. As long as they're not being harmed, they're comfortable. That's all that matters. I want it to be easy for the doctor, because if it's the easier it is for the doctor, the higher the probability of a successful result. That's what matters to me.
Yep.
So yeah, it is possible, and it's done all the time at a lot of clinics, but there is a threshold, and a lot of doctors will, they identify, oh, we got a diffuse thinner here. If they're good, they'll pay more attention to it as far as, thinking it through. Do I want to take this on? Will I be doing this patient a favor, or will I doing him harm? More or less.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much, Joe.
You said you had one more question?
Okay. Let me just see. Okay, here's one. I don't know if you. So I've listened to stuff online, and it seemed like a reputable doctor. Is there such a thing as, I'll just say it in layman's term, the hair gene turning off? I know you're going to continuously get less and less hair, and it's going to fall out. But is there such a thing as a hair gene turning off at some point in your life?
No.
Where you stop losing hair? Okay.
Oh, wait a minute. Where
Okay.
you stop losing hair?
Yeah, it's.
Okay. So you're asking, is there a point where your hair is no longer affected by DHT?
Yeah, and it was mentioned like the gene that. Yeah.
No, it comes as you get older. The reason, I haven't thought about this in a long time, but the reason why you're not losing your hair as you get older, or you're losing less hair as you get older, is a couple reasons. Number one, you're not noticing as much hair because you don't have as much hair to lose. Right?
Yeah.
Like if you're quantifying your hair loss by looking in the shower every day, or in your sink every day, and looking at the rough count of the hairs that are falling, as you get older and you're losing more hair, that will logically be reduced because there's less hair to actually fall out. Okay, that's the logic behind that. But there's also the point that as you get older, you're creating less testosterone in your body. Therefore, there's less testosterone to turn into dihydrotestosterone, which is what is affecting your hair loss. Like your hair has receptors for DHT on the genetically speaking, on the cellular level. There's a binding that goes on where DHT, I liken it to a strangulation, strangles that hair, right? But as you get older, there's less DHT. It's affecting it not quite as severely, and so that's why not a lot of people lose all their hair as they get older. I mean, there's a lot of variations on that, but it's not like nothing just turns off because of a certain age.
Yep.
You just produce less of different things, which winds up affecting you differently. And of course, you've got less hair to lose to begin with, and that's why it can look like you're not losing as much hair. And different factors affect that. I know that's clear as mud, but I hope there's something in there you can make sense of.
No, it is clear. It is.
All right.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Yeah, my pleasure, Ed. Thanks for calling.
Okay, bye.
And I believe we got Morty on hold. Morty, you still with us?
Yeah. Hang on one second. Let me mute your. Hey.
Right on. How you doing, Morty?
I'm good, man. Didn't make the call in on Friday, and I had a few minutes. I figured I'd give you a ring.
You're missed by the crowd in the chat room, but it's okay. Glad you're with us. What's shaking, bro?
Yeah, man. Oh, well, let's see. I had a haircut, and things are looking a lot better.
Okay.
Actually, it's funny that I mention it. So I've got wavy hair, and as you know, the doctor has taken some hair from the sides and the back. I already had a fair amount of thinness slightly above and just slightly behind the ears.
Mm-hmm.
And, when the hair grows in, it tends to flip up as opposed to down if it gets more than a certain length, because it's wavy. It makes a spiral, but it's obviously a much bigger one.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks awful. So I end up having to trim it, and it just kind of makes me sad because here I'm hoping, let me see if I can finally grow my hair out, something that I've been wanting to do since I was a freaking teenager.
Morty,
So
the sweet spot for length, my friend. Give it time.
Okay.
Let it continue to grow. You're at a fantastic spot in your development where you're able to grow your transplanted hair out. How long has it been since your second one?
December.
So just 4.5 months. So
yeah, pretty much.
So you're at a fantastic spot where the hair that you've got and the hair that's coming in is the hair that you've already had from the first transplant. That's your night and day difference right there. The second one is more of a slow transition because you don't have that barren space that was filled. You're adding to it, and I think you said that some was done on the crown as well, but you've gotten that huge oh my god moment that you wanted. So, and that's great.
Yeah.
So now as those hairs are growing and the newer hairs are growing, you get to experiment with finding the multiple sweet spots for length, and there will be multiple spots. I'm actually going through that right now myself because I'm letting my hair grow longer. I don't know if you can tell on the video, but I'm having that moment where because the donor area is starting to get fuller due to length, it's starting to in my eye when I look at myself in the mirror from my left angle looking back, it looks like the back is a bit too puffy for the top given my hairstyle. And it's okay.
That's exactly what I was dealing with.
Yeah. So it's like, all right, I need to hang tight. I need to stay the course to see where we get to next. Because I've not grown my hair out in a long time. I'm talking at least 7 to 10 years. In fact, the last...
I saw you had when you had those curls, man, I was like, whoa,
yes,
that looks fucking cool.
Yes, I had curls. I was doing perms.
Yes.
For those of you watching and listening, Morty's just kidding. I've never had curly hair. But the reason why I had my surgery in 2010 with Dr. Wong, where he was placing more hair into my crown, it's because I was transitioning away from my I call it my pompadour days. I was transitioning away from that, and I wanted to start doing. I wanted to start wearing a shorter haircut. And when I did that, I realized that the lower half of my crown, and when I say lower half, I mean if you take the radius of my crown and then draw a line straight through it, the bottom half was thinner than the top half because the bottom half had never had graft work. It had only been the top half. And that hair was weaker than, slightly miniaturized, but hanging on because of finasteride. The hair on the top half was terminal because it was transplanted from further down in my donor region. So it stood out to me, and I wanted it to be, I wanted there to be a better balance. And so that's the entire reason why I had hair transplant number whatever in 2010, and it worked out beautifully. So once it grew in and I cut everything short, there's a beautiful level of even coverage. And I've been super happy with it ever since. And we did a little bit more in 2019 just to beef it up a little bit. But yeah, it was a huge success, and I've not had it longer since then. I've always kept it in the roughly 3 guard range for the past 13 years. So now I want to do something different, and we'll see how long I stick with it. I might break down and say, screw it, I'm going down back to a buzz cut, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I'm not nearly at a buzz cut. I mean, I went into the barber and it was all scissor cut. She didn't take the buzz out of my head at all.
Yeah.
So, so I didn't necessarily go that far. I mean, you and I are children of the 1980s, and we remember what hair looked like.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And part of me is like, because I grew up in a very conservative family, so I never grew my hair out long, but I always liked musician, because I love music, and the musicians had these freaking shoulder length hair and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And, it's one of these things where it's like, okay, it's starting to grow out, and, like I said, it got some length on it, and it started to curl upward. And unfortunately, because it curled upward, it didn't provide that downward coverage that you get over the donor area. And the donor area, I wouldn't say that it's horribly thin, but if you comb it in the opposite direction, if you comb it up because the hair wants to grow down, it doesn't look nice.
Yeah.
And if the hair curls up, then it definitely doesn't look nice. So it had been just every day the battle was, okay, get up, get out of the shower, kind of try to blow dry it so that it stays down as opposed to curl up.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, I was like, this woman I was seeing, she's like, you got to get a haircut. You got to get it. I was like, all right, fine. So I went ahead and got them done. And it looks a lot better, but at the same time, it's like, oh man, it's one of those things where, you kind of have these fantasies about being a certain way. I mean, the other side of it is I'm also 53 years old, so who the fuck am I kidding? But then I look at Robert Plant, who's like in his 60s, and he's still got this fucking amazing head of hair.
Yeah.
So,
well, look,
he's probably in his 70s now. Exactly. Good luck.
Here's the beautiful thing about the sadness of cutting your hair. And this is something that you've probably not heard in a long time. Your hair will grow back, Morty.
This is true.
Your hair will grow back.
This is absolutely true.
Doesn't it feel good to hear that?
Cool.
Doesn't it feel good to hear that?
Yeah.
It's like yeah.
Yeah, it is. And not only is it growing back, I'm in this mode, because I remember this, from month 4 to month 10, where every day you get up in the morning and you look in the mirror and it looks better than it did the day before.
Yes.
And, that is by far the best part about getting a hair transplant. If you have to pick a good reason to get one, is that honeymoon period where, you're seeing shit because again, I had the crown. It's interesting. You talk about the top and the bottom half of your crown. I basically have almost the same situation. The top half of my crown was gone. Well, not really. Or you could say you could either call it the top half of the crown or the back of the mid scalp, depending on where you draw the dividing line.
Yeah.
Was gone.
Yeah.
And the crown itself, there is coverage if it grows out, but if you shave it down, you can see the differences in the caliper of hair on the crown itself versus the surrounding donor. The hair is definitely of a thinner caliper, but like I said, when it all grows in, it looks fairly decent. But that I had the same thing done where it was just that. So, but yeah, I part of me is, and then again, when that grows in longer, what ends up happening is that I get this kind of flat on the back of the hair, and then it kind of, because I get wavy curly hair, it kind of creates this curling bunching, around the ears and around the back of the head.
Yeah.
And it's annoying, but like you said, and I've talked to a number of people who do not have hair loss problems and growing their hair out. It's like, yeah, you've got the in between time is always very awkward. So thank you for the support, and I'm going to go at it again. We'll see. Maybe over the winter it'll probably be easier.
Yeah.
Anyway, the other thing that I wanted to call you about was I wanted to get your opinion on the recession and how it affects the hair loss industry. Because we're in one right now, and, hair transplantation surgery is, one could argue, a luxury item. And same thing also goes for
how dare you?
Medicines and medication.
How dare you to say that it is anything less than an absolute necessity for life itself? Because that's how a lot of people look at it.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree. I think that if I could get my health, if I could get my insurance to pay for it, I probably would have.
Yeah.
But I also lived with a shaved head for 20, almost 25 years before I ended up doing what I did. So
yeah,
it is a luxury item. So yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
So, yeah. So the recession and how it's affecting clinics. But what was the actual question in that?
Yeah. What do you think? Because you're a man. First of all, you've been in this game through multiple recessions.
Yeah.
So you know what typically happens, and I'm just being the fly on the wall. Somebody who's this is the first recession that I'm in where I've actually gotten quote unquote in on the industry, and I'm curious about, what it was like I don't know, like in 2008 when we had that big recession. Then,
well, it's a good question. Here's the way I look at it: if you're a good hair transplant clinic and you're not, how can I say this delicately? If you're good at what you do and you let your work do the marketing for you,
okay,
then the people that are still in the position to have surgery will find you. But that's the challenge, is making sure that people find you. I'll put it like this. So here's a difference in clinics that's going on today. So I work with 15 different doctors, and majority of them are doing just fine. They've all admitted that they're not booked out quite as far as they used to be, but we're talking months.
Okay.
Like one clinic I was working with was booked out for about 14 months, and now they're booked out to like 8 months. Are they concerned? No. Are they noticing? Yes. And it is because there are a bit fewer people that are inquiring, but there's more competition. And but here's and there's one clinic that I just learned about that is, I won't say how far they're booked out, but they're having a bit of an issue, and I know exactly why they're having the issue. And it's very simple. Like what I'm going to say, like any clinic can take this and use it, but it's not rocket science, and a lot of people already know this. Get your work out there. If you're not getting your work out there, then no one's going to know what you're doing. If you're not documenting in-house properly, then you've got shit to share online. That's where I was going with this. So one of the things I do when I have a clinic that I work with, when I accept a clinic to be a member, one of the first things I'm doing before I actually accept them, this is part of my process, is I tell them I need the raw, unedited images, not the ones that you've been posting online that are, compressed and, just completely screwed up, because of editing, because of compression on, uploading onto, Instagram or whatever. I don't deal with those images. I got to have the originals. And, and if it's difficult for them to do that, it's usually because they've got bad photos to begin with. Or in other words, what I mean to say is if they have a hard time getting me photos that have the resolution that I need so I can zoom in and look at the hairlines and manipulate the images and angles and all this stuff so I can see what's going on, then it means that they're using bad tactics or bad methods for documentation. They're using a bad camera. If they're using a camera at all, maybe they're using an old iPhone. They got bad lighting. They might be using flash photography, which is always bad. So those are the things that I look for two reasons. One, I need to be able to see what's going on with their work before I even consider taking them on, before I get into the nitty gritty and the paperwork and all this stuff I need to see. But it's also, the second reason is so that I can advise them on how to present themselves online. And if they have crap for documentation, it's crap in, crap out. Like they can't share anything that's compelling online that displays what they're actually doing.
Gotcha.
Like it's all very simple, but it's all tied into each other in what I do with these clinics. So the clinic I was just about to talk about, they're having some issues with not long-term bookings, but I'll say on the shorter end of medium end bookings. and they're starting to get concerned. And my question I asked them was like, well, how are you promoting yourself? Are you doing your social media? Because I'm not seeing anything. The answer is no. And they're not using their resources properly, the ones that I've told them to use properly, because it's not rocket science. Like, if you have a good product, there's a very simple formula and method to get your name out there, to share the work, and there's still going to be plenty of people out there that will say, you know what, that's a clinic I'd like to consider. It's not rocket science. And so, to answer your question, it does affect the industry. It affects some clinics a lot, most clinics more than others, and it all has to do with their existing reputation. But reputations mean nothing for new patients. If they've just started their research and they're looking at all these different names, everyone has a great reputation. It's only the people that have researched for quite a while that come to recognize, okay, yeah, this guy goes back for X number of years, and he's accepted as this, accepted as that. The results are looking good. It's not just one or two. It's like maybe one or two bad ones, but most of them are good, as opposed to one or two good ones. Most of them are bad. The things that matter. So it takes time for people to recognize that. But if you're looking for a clinic, you're just starting your research, and you're looking for clinics, you're going to be barraged by all these clinics that do get it, and they got crap work. Like, their work looks horrible.
Oh, yeah.
You don't know any better because you're just starting your research. And guess what? Guess what? That's why a lot of people go to Turkey. That's why a lot of people go to Mexico, which is the up-and-coming next big market.
Yeah.
Your friend Dr. John Cole told me that 6 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't disbelieve him. I believed him, but I was also kind of surprised. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, damn if he's not right. I bet that I agree. That will be the next big market. And guess what? It's getting there. It's still growing. So more people are going to cheap clinics, and but the good clinics, the strong ones, they'll be fine.
Gotcha.
If they listen to me.
Well, I think that's a big part of it right there. It's interesting because you and Spencer have you have as the good guys win the fight, and it's extremely important that they use the right weapons. And when you're talking about hair transplant surgeons, the good ones, they are really, really, really good at doing hair transplantation.
Yeah.
What they may not necessarily be good at is all the rest of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And these days, especially like you mentioned, social media, the quote unquote rest of it is so important, certainly for initial contacts and stuff like that. And that's why what you guys do is really important, because what you're doing is you're basically telling all of these hordes of people, slow your roll, take a breath, and do your research. Which is the best thing that you can do if you're trying to get into this space. And I really appreciate the fact that you're doing this 5 days a week. This is awesome. Hopefully you're getting more people besides me, who's just I'm Mr. in the peanut gallery for freaking ever at this point. And I hope that I hope you guys continue to fight the good fight. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell, and I do my best. I like I said, I wanted to get my hair cut, and my hairdresser's like, hey, I have this, I have this guy who, he's in his 20s and he's feeling very self-conscious about his hair loss, and he says, oh, I'm losing my hair and I'm not married yet, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And, so I'm like, okay, well, give him my number and have him call me. So that's what I'm doing, trying to do my part there also. But, it's a deluge. I remember when I first went to this place, this was like after my first hair transplant, and I went there because I hadn't stepped in a barber in freaking 30. Well, yeah, I hadn't gone into a barber in probably at least 25 years.
Yeah.
And and so I basically became friendly with this particular barber, and I told him my whole story. But yeah, anyway. So, Joe, thank you so much. It's always great hearing your voice.
Yeah, thanks for calling, buddy. Always good to hear from you, and tell Dr. Cole I said hi.
I most certainly will do that. You take care.
All right, buddy. You too. Bye-bye. All right, and is there someone on hold? I think there is. Is there someone there? Nope.
Hi, yes.
Okay. Yeah, you're on with the main event. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Okay, awesome. My name's Justin, calling from Dallas, Texas. I had a question. I kind of just wanted to share my experience, and then I had a question, and
Okay.
just to see if you had any thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Hit me.
Okay. Well, I'm about 30 years old. I've been losing my hair since I was 16, 17 a day. So I'm kind of expecting that eventually I will continue to lose my hair as I have.
Well, hold on.
Yeah.
Let's unwrap that a little bit. So, can I assume you're taking both now?
Right now I'm taking dutasteride, minoxidil, using ketoconazole shampoo.
Okay. Is it topical or oral minoxidil?
Oral minoxidil.
Oral, 2.5?
2.5 in the morning and 2.5 at night.
Okay. So, and how often are you taking dutasteride? Is it daily or a couple times a week?
Daily right now.
Okay.
But I've been considering switching back to finasteride.
Okay. So, is your hair loss continuing, or has it at least stabilized?
It continues very slowly.
Okay. Interesting. Are you taking generic dutasteride, or is it Avodart?
Avodart, name brand.
Okay, good. Don't change. Yeah, that's good. And how long you been taking that?
The dutasteride I've been on about 4 years.
Okay. All right. So you've committed. You're doing it right, long term. Okay, and you're slowly continuing to recede or thin. Is it recession, thinning, or both?
It's more of thinning at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But I have about 6,000 to 7,000 hairs transplanted onto my scalp, so I have probably good coverage decent coverage from the hair transplants alone.
Okay.
I would think.
Grafts or hairs, because it's very different.
Grafts.
Okay. All right. Great. So, and just to recap, you had 2 FUTs from Dr. Wong?
I had 2 FUTs from Dr. Wong and one from Dr. Arocha.
Okay. Which one was first, Dr. Arocha?
Dr. Arocha was first.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Fair enough. So, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to get that medication thing clarified. So, continue with what you're telling me.
Yeah, I guess I'm 30 years old. I'm entering a very demanding industry, so that was part of the reason I just recently got a hair transplant, again with Dr. Wong, because I won't be able to do it for, the foreseeable future.
Right.
And in terms of, I'd like to try to make sure as best as I can that I have full coverage when I'm older, similar to, how you do, Joe.
Okay.
And right now my plan was just to make sure I don't do anything for the next 10, 15 years. I don't know if there's anything else I really can do or that I should look for.
Mm-hmm.
But, a lot of my hairs were transplanted when I still had hair, but I was just receding and thinning.
Right.
So probably I would say more than a third of them are up front, the first quarter of my head, and then probably the other 2/3 are spread among my mid scalp and in the top half of the crown.
Okay. All right.
So, just thinking long term, do you have any advice?
Well, you just had your third. How long ago did you have your third one?
Just about a month or 2 ago.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So you're. Well. Yeah. avoid surgery as much as possible. That's my first and foremost piece of advice, because you've had 3, like you said, you're 30 years old. That's already a lot to have had by the time you're 30. It's tough because, I mean, who am I to talk, right? I've had 10 surgeries, and I'm happy with the result. I mean, I've got great coverage, but I do think that you set yourself up where, you know, you said you won't be able to do a hair transplant for a while because your new job. I totally get it, but I also think that's a blessing on some level, because you need something to stop you from having more surgery. So I'd say this for the short term: give the hair transplant you just had the time it needs to, you know, start growing, continue growing, mature, and do what it's going to do. Right? You're experienced with this already, so you know what to expect. Your final result a year, maybe 15 months in, when you're also factoring the maturation process, the refinement of the grafts that have grown. So I think that once you do that, then you're in a better position to evaluate what you want to do. But I also think that because you've been through 3 surgeries already, 3 FUTs by the time of 30, and you have slow continued loss, not aggressive continued loss, I think that you should continue to look at the non-surgical options, but also look into maybe look into applications like Dermatch to fill those areas as they continue to thin out, so that the need that you have to add more hair will be lessened, because you might find that Dermatch or Topic, whatever you choose, does a great job for you. And that works really well for a lot of guys where, yeah, I can't count how many times I've talked to someone. They're like, yeah, I'll just keep using Dermatch or Topic, whatever I'm using, until I don't have enough hair for it to latch onto, and then I'll look at getting another surgery or look at getting my first surgery. So that's one thing I would consider for your case to tell you, is just, you know, find alternatives to surgery in whatever form it may come. And as you get older, before I continue that thought, what areas have been covered so far? You had the hairline done, mid-scalp. What about the crown?
The crown probably has 1,000 in it.
Okay.
Maybe, yeah, around 1,000.
Okay. And did Dr. Wong talk to you about what he thinks your eventual pattern will be? Did he treat you as a Norwood 6?
He didn't disclose that, but his thought was that I'd be fine with continued medication, but just knowing myself, I think that's unlikely. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pausing a lot because I'm trying to process this, because there's no easy answer except for just don't rush into another surgery. So let the hair do what it's going to do. That might change how you look at this. It might be enough to where even with continued loss, it's difficult to see it. And never forget, it's not how it feels, it's how it looks. That's what matters. So, you know, justify justify your approach to what you're doing based on what you see in the mirror, not what you feel when you're running your hands through your hair, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think keeping away from surgery as much as possible, finding stopgap measures to prevent you from going under the knife again till you're blue in the face is warranted, because you don't have a lot of hair left for surgery compared to when you're a virgin scalp. And I don't know what kind of candidate you are, and this is very generalized information I'm throwing at you, but you may have a fantastic donor. You may have more strip in you. I wouldn't recommend it at this point unless you're willing to understand that the probability of a stretch scar at this point is high to whatever degree. Doesn't necessarily mean it'd be horrible. It could just be something that just be an annoyance to you, or it might not even care. But FUE, again, might be something to consider. I mean, that as your next option if you wind up doing something. It all depends on your donor resources. How did Dr. Wong rate your donor as a resource after this last surgery?
Well, my scalp's returned. The laxity is returned each time. They've been able to harvest a similar number of grafts, but he said it just depends if laxity returns again.
Shit! You sound like me.
That's what I've been thinking.
Yeah.
So I mean, I might have room for one more, and then a small FUE similar to you, or I might just be going straight to an FUE. But either way, I figure I have somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 grafts left.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure they're
don't be in a rush to use all that hair. Okay. That's all I can say. I think that's the best advice anyone can give you is ride this one out as long as you can. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be many, many years before you have your next surgery, even with continued, albeit slow and gradual, per your words, continued loss. And it also depends on how you feel about having a degraded aesthetic, even to a degree, a small degree. Some guys can't handle it. Some guys are like, yeah, as long as it looks natural and I've got enough coverage to work something, then I'm fine with it. If it were me at this point, if my transplanted hair started to thin out, I'd be upset, and I would be looking for. I would be trying to figure out what to do, but I wouldn't be devastated. I'd be like, okay, well, what do you want? I'm getting in my late 50s, if assuming it happens in several years. Assuming I get to be as old as Spencer Coburn. I'd be like, yeah, I can deal with this. I'm Spencer's age, so.
Yeah, I guess you probably start caring less in your 60s.
Oh, I mean, I would if I was that age. So
yeah.
I'm still young and sprightly at this point, so I can't say I feel that way now, but
right.
I had to throw it across his bow right there. But yeah, you're in good shape now. Let this do what it's going to do, and hang on to it as long as you can. And I think maybe if you're in Dallas, do you have a doctor that you deal with for your medications?
I have a GP that I go to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and say this publicly. Try to maybe throw a caveat in there. Dr. Yaker, another doctor I work with, he's in Plano, and he's been following the non-surgical side of things and working on that side of things for a while now. And he might be a good doctor to talk to about alternatives to deal with this slow progression that you've got. And I'm not saying he has a solution for you, but because he's, relatively speaking, down the street from you compared to, Dr. Wong, for these kinds of non-surgical issues, talk to him. See what he has to say. He's very straightforward. He won't try to beat around the bush with you. And see what he has to say. He might have a different take on it than I do.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Right.
The only other quick question I had was, during my recent hair transplant, I know you mentioned that usually it's best to shave the recipient area during a hair transplant. The hair on my crown wasn't shaved. I assume that's okay in some situations. I know Dr. Wong's team has a lot of experience.
Of course. Like if the team feels comfortable doing that, there's a reason for it. But look, I make no bones about it. When I worked at that clinic, and people were saying, yeah, I'd like to. Before I continue that thought, just so you know, there is a or there used to be, I don't know if there's now, but there used to be a requirement for the number of grafts. It couldn't go over a certain number of grafts for them to do a non-shave. So this last surgery you had was probably under 2,500 grafts. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And as far as implanted in the non-shaped areas, it was only about 500 or
yeah,
600.
okay, yeah, fair enough. But I would tell patients that would call in and they'd request a non-shave, even if it was under that threshold, I'd talk them out of it. I'd say, like, I just don't like it because I think about my own head.
Yeah.
It's like I wouldn't want there to be any potential hair in the way of my doctor's field of vision. I want them to see everything as if it's jumping out in their face. I don't want nothing in the way. Clean that plate. But that's just me. Doesn't mean that it doesn't work out. It obviously does work. In fact, there's an IAHRS member in Alpharetta, Georgia, that's all he does is non-shaved. That's his bread and butter. He does it day in and day out. Patient wants to shave. He says, nope, I don't want you to shave. Come in with your hair as is. Seems to get good growth, and that's fine. Good for him. It ain't my thing. It's my personal opinion on it. So that's that. But what was I going to say? I think I made my thought. Yeah, I would try to talk people out of it just because I didn't want that hassle for the clinic of having to deal with hair and find the spots. Anytime they do it, it didn't seem to be an issue, but it was just the way I like it for myself and the way I try to talk other people into it, when they're having their surgeries. So, but they didn't for you, not a big deal. It's all good. All right?
Great. That's all. Yeah, thanks, Joe.
All right, Justin. It was Justin, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for calling and call back anytime.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. 833-563-4247. That's 1-833-563-4247. Had a string of great calls there. I appreciate everyone calling in. We had Morty, we had Justin, and we had Ed. And I think, 3 calls so far. Great questions. And we got time for more. So you can give me a call toll-free North America, 833-563-4247. Sorry. And, of course, you can use Skype or any other calling app from anywhere else on the planet to give me a call. Happy to answer your questions. And I can look in the chat room, see if there's anything going on there. What we got here? No, FSK, Spencer is not my uncle. Greg Potoff. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. Best clinic anywhere in the world for Norwood 6 to 7 with good prices. I know one clinic that is by far the best in the world. The Singular Clinic. Guaranteed results. And if it doesn't grow, they'll give you a bar of gold for every hair that didn't grow. Unfortunately, they're super expensive, so it's not for you. Okay, that's not true. What is true is that there's no such thing as one best clinic. So there are a lot of great clinics that work with Norwood 6 and Norwood 7 patients. There's a couple that do stand out that are surprisingly taking on Norwood 7 patients. I work with one of them, that's Eugenics Hair Sciences in India, with specifically Dr. Pradeep Sethi and Dr. Erica Bansal. Who else is there? I know Dr. Cole has worked on some extensive cases, and of course Hassan and Wong, some extensive cases. Haddingen Hair in Switzerland, fantastic at aggressive cases. But, good prices, it's relative. I don't know what you consider to be good prices. So, in full disclosure, I work with all these clinics, and they all pay to be on my website after being reviewed and put through the ringer as far as checking out how they do things, except for Hassan Wong. Dr. Wong does not pay to be on my website because he's my doctor. So it would be hypocritical to not have him on my website, wouldn't it? I think so. What else is going on here? We got, I don't see a lot of questions. People, you can ask me questions in the chat room. I am happy to leave if I don't get any questions because I do have a lot of other things going on. And let's see. Is there anything I can talk about? I'm trying to think of anything to talk. I think I covered everything earlier on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes. And if I don't get another phone call, I will be ending the show until tomorrow. Today is Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. And I got to tell you, guys, this has been fun for me. It's been a hell of a learning experience for me. And I got to give credit to Spencer Coverin, because if he hadn't brought me on as the co-host of The Bald Truth, what was it, 8 years ago? Almost 8 years ago. 2015, 8 years ago. I wouldn't have the confidence to sit in front of this camera and talk to all of you. And it's been fun doing the pre-recorded stuff where I create my videos, my education videos, and I get to edit and have fun with it and try to make it fun for you guys. But to sit here behind this camera or behind this microphone in front of this camera and just rattle stuff off the top of my head and run the phones and run the streaming software and the sound and all this stuff, I've finally got it down. It's been a learning experience, even with all the background I have being in front of the camera on The Bald Truth. So, I want to thank Spencer for that, for taking me on and giving me the experience to be able to sit here. Some other people I want to talk about. There's Y from the Women's Hair Loss Project. I mentioned her yesterday. She is the OG female hair loss, how can I put this, mentor. Like, she is, I'll call her a mentor. She started she got the website, her Instagram, her YouTube. She's got some great shorts on YouTube. And she is putting out some content now that I think is more valuable than ever. And it doesn't just apply to women. It applies to men too, because one of the things that she's talking about a lot are wigs and helping to work out the acceptance for wig wearing for a lot of women. Women have a lot more freedom to wear wigs than men do. But it doesn't mean that they feel comfortable with it themselves. And she's doing a lot to help other women with tips and tricks and to gain that confidence that they need to deal with hair loss through the use of wigs and other treatments. Like she talks about other treatments that she's been through. And so I think it's fantastic, the work she does. She always deserves the props that I give her and that she gets anywhere else. And she will always be, or this channel and this broadcast will always be a friend to the Women's Hair Loss Project. Just wanted to give her some recognition there. So we got about 30 seconds left and no one's calling in, which is fine. I don't have to have a whole bunch of calls every show. Had some great calls earlier, so that's fantastic. So I'm going to give you guys one last shot. The number is toll-free, 833-563-4247. It is toll-free in North America. If you can't, if I said it too fast, it's right there on the screen, bottom right-hand corner, right here. Oh, and there we go. Saved by the bell. I was about to hang up. Hey, thanks for calling. What's your name and where are you calling from?
John from Chicago.
Hello, John from Chicago. How you doing? What can I help you with?
I'm doing well. I actually know about you years ago. I got a transplant from Dr. Shapiro.
Oh, excellent.
In Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And talking 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
My question to you is, and I was very happy with the results at that time, but since I've continued. again, and I don't know that Dr. Shapiro might be the right choice as I've gotten so much older.
Mm-hmm.
Do you offer like one-on-one? I know I was just looking. You have a mentor website or something along those lines. I haven't been following you, but do you offer one-on-one guidance, like paid or whatever it is?
I appreciate the offer. I get asked this all the time, and I've made the decision long ago not to do paid consultations, and the reason why, well, there's a couple of reasons why. If I were to make that a part of my services, it would be very expensive because, well, it would because of my experience, because of my knowledge and things like that. And I say that because there are people out there offering these one-on-one paid consultations that do not have any clinical experience. They have zero clinical experience except for being a patient, and they don't tend to. How can I say this delicately? They don't tend to express the proper attitude when they're making their YouTube videos. If you understand what I'm saying, I'm trying to be nice today. I'm in a good mood, so I don't want to disparage anyone. But so logically, if I were to start offering consultations, it'd be expensive. I've had people offer me $1,000 for an hour of my time for a one-on-one consultation, and I've decided not to do that because I don't want to be in that camp. I don't want to be a quote-unquote paid consultant because I think personally it tarnishes my brand. I'd rather.
You have already been sharing everything so graciously from what I can tell online.
Thank you.
And
thank
through
you.
Posts from years and years ago that I remember you. I remember when I used to see your posts. I'm like, oh, okay, this guy was an inspiration because he went so far.
Well, thank you. I will say this. I do have a form that you can fill out on my website.
Okay.
Where you upload photos. I give you instructions on that, and I'm very clear in my disclaimer. I may or may not get back to you.
Sure.
And it's only because I'm busy as a one-arm paper hanger. I got so many plates spinning right now. I've got videos I'm trying to shoot, videos I've already shot that I'm trying to edit. I'm also dealing at this time while I'm speaking, I'm waiting for a contractor to come in after my show so that he can give me an estimate to repair the damage from a leak in my ceiling from earlier in the month that hasn't been fixed yet. And then I'm also dealing with locksmiths at my wife's business that I got to supervise. So yeah, lots of stuff going on. I just don't have time for that kind of thing. But what I do is I have that there, and over the next couple of weeks when I do have time to actually open that inbox to have a look, then I might have some time to check it out. So if you're not in a rush to get my opinion, then feel free to send it off to me, and if I can get to it, then I'll get to it.
Hey, I appreciate it.
Fair enough?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Have a great one.
All right, buddy. Thanks for calling.
Yep.
Bye-bye. That was a great call. 833-563-4247. Toll-free North America, and I don't know what it'll cost you anywhere else. If you got a phone app, you can give that a shot. Skype should be free, I think. Let's look here in the chat, see if there's. I saw some comments being made. Vince, can we talk about your donor farming and what the best way to restore a depleted donor? It was talked about quite a bit back in the day, in the mid-2000s. Hasn't really panned out. There are some doctors that will, I'm trying to find the word, it's been called recharging the donor. I don't think that's a proper description, because recharging the donor area indicates or implies that there's that it allows more work to be done, or hair to be taken from the donor area. I think that if you're in a position where you need it recharged, then if it's successfully recharged, leave it. Just don't touch it. So I know that Hair Transplant Mentor Accepted member Dr. Cole has done some of that work, and I believe there's been some success with that. Dr. Mwamba out of Belgium he's doing some of that kind of work. I'm trying to think of who else off the top of my head. I'm drawing some blanks, but it can be done to a degree, and it's usually reserved for cases where beard hair can be used. Some scalp hair, like if there's an area that's untouched, it can be harvested a little bit, not, hopefully not too much, to redistribute some of that density into the areas that have been over-harvested, if that's the issue. So there is potential for that, but I've never seen anything miraculous as far as a turnaround goes. I hope that helps answer your question. Dante Manelli, loving the daily shows. Thank you. It's fun. Mordecai, Joe, your show's gotten a whole lot smoother, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm working at it, and I'm getting more accustomed to having octopus arms up here. I was like, Joe, $1,000 an hour, does that include the boyfriend experience or just hand relief? It always goes to the sex for you, doesn't it? It always goes there. I could have come. I had a good comeback, but I'm going to keep it to myself. Sergey, does it make sense to test generic finasteride pills in a lab to make sure it actually contains finasteride? No, and the reason being is, I lost my thought. The reason being is, if your pharmacy changes the source of the generic on a regular basis based on availability, are you going to keep testing it? Are you going to keep testing whatever it is you're getting? I think that if you can find a source that you feel is good for you, like it's working, and you want to test it out just to make sure that it's got nothing bad in it, I guess, then sure, have it tested, and then if it works out for you, then tell your pharmacy, you know what, as I'm fleshing this out, no, it doesn't make sense. If you're having success with your generic, just keep taking your generic. Find the manufacturer and make sure it's from the same manufacturer every time you pick it up. If it changes, then ask your pharmacy, why is it different than what I was getting? It used to be from, it used to be brand X, now it's brand Y. Why is it now brand Y? I want brand X. I don't want to mess around with this. And they'll argue with you. They'll tell you there's no difference, and you can tell them to go stuff themselves. And if they don't get it for you, you're going to a different pharmacy, and they'll get it for you if it's available. If not, then my recommendation, go with name brand. Mordecai, Joe, can you read Russian? A little bit. Helps to have a wife that's fluent in Russian. Mike Pedroza, yes, it should be shaved for the best possible. Okay. AL1407, Joe, can you please discuss the relationship of long-term finasteride usage in relation to prostate cancer? Some light discussion today. What would you like to know? I mean, finasteride came out to help with enlarged prostate, benign prostate hyperplasia. God, I've not talked about this stuff in a while. And the only thing that I can say, and I've not looked at this in a long time, but I remember there were some studies that came out saying that, and by the way, I'm not a doctor, came out saying that through the use of continued usage of finasteride, the chances of getting prostate cancer increase. And that's not true. The studies were saying that the increase of more aggressive types of cancer or prostate cancer is increased. But that in and of itself is also misleading, because what it's saying, that's actually the second half of the result. If I remember correctly, the chance of prostate cancer in general went down. But if you were to develop prostate cancer, then that prostate cancer that you would develop would most likely be, not guaranteed, but you would have a higher probability of developing a more aggressive form as opposed to a lesser aggressive form of prostate cancer. So that outcome has been greatly misrepresented, very manipulated for a particular narrative. Maybe it was a mistake on the interpretation of that, but that's the way it was. So I hope that helps. How would you describe Kyle MacLachlan's hairline in Twin Peaks? That would be Kyle MacLachlan, I believe you're referring to. He has an amazing hairline. He has amazing hair, and he's one of those guys that just makes you kind of irritated to watch him. Great actor. But yeah, awesome hair, awesome actor, and I've always been a bit jelly of him. Hope that helps. Yeah, so, all right, it's 4:29. We're moving into the top of the hour. I'm going to wrap this up if I don't get one more call inside of the next 60 seconds. And no, Morty, it doesn't mean for you to call back. I appreciate the sentiment if that's what you're thinking. I'm pretty sure you were. Number, toll free, 833-563-4247. I need to remind you guys, hit the like button on this video. If this video is helpful, or this live stream, this Q&A, this AMA, I might start calling this Joe Tillman AMA, because I know a lot of people like that. Yeah, hit the like button. Show your support. I'm here for free. I don't charge you guys anything. And, of course, if you're not a subscriber, do click the subscribe button. And if you want to get notified when I am live, which is every day at the same time, do click the or ring the bell for all notifications. You do have that option once you subscribe. And I think it's useful. You should give that a shot. And let's see, is anything else? Anything else going on here? We got, 15 more seconds, people. 833-563-4247. That's toll free in North America, and you can use any calling app from anywhere in the world to give me a shout. And we've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I am wrapping it up, folks. Thank you so much for joining me. It was actually a good show. I enjoyed it. And do check out the supporting websites down below in the description. Several websites. They share the same type of message as I do. Surgery is the last resort. Exercise every non-surgical option that you can find before you go get cut. Because as Spencer Copeland always says, once you get cut, you can't go back. And that's true. So thanks very much, everyone. Have a good night. Goodbye.